We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening, I'm Emily Carver, standing in for the brilliant Neil Oliver while he takes a well-deserved break for the next fortnight. We're live on GB News TV and on radio for the next 2 hours. Coming up on the programme, with the cost of living crisis likely to get even worse, I'll be asking if there is a risk of civil disobedience coming to the streets. As industrial action grips the country once again, we'll be debating whether strikers should be sanctioned, or are they within their rights to withdraw their labour in a bid to improve their pay and conditions? Most women don't enjoy being wolf-whistled or catcalled, I certainly don't, but should it really become a criminal offence? We'll be discussing that as well. Plus, we'll be meeting a truly Great Britain, as usual, discussing whether it's time for a middle-aged Love Island, and I'll be having plenty of chats with my panel, Lembit Opik and Lisa McKenzie. Lots to come, but first, let's get the latest news headlines.
Emily, thank you. I'm Bethany Elsey, here to bring you up to date on GB News. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the death of a child in Lincolnshire. 9-year-old Lilia Valutitio was fatally stabbed in Boston on Tuesday. Lincolnshire police say a 22-year-old man is now in custody. He was detained following information from the public. They say they're not looking for anyone else in connection with their investigation. Tory leadership contender Liz Truss says she's fighting for support from her party members. Speaking at a campaign whilst in Bromley, she welcomed Tom Tugendhat's endorsement, but declined to say whether the Select Committee chair would be given a role in her cabinet if she wins.
This is a very, very close race, and I am fighting for every vote. What I will deliver is a growing economy, more opportunity across our country, lower taxes, and unleashing the potential of everybody across the United Kingdom. That's what I stand for, and that's why I want people to support me.
Well, Tom Tugendhat says her promises of tax cuts are based on true Conservative principles.
Well, I rebelled on the tax rises about a year ago. I've been tough on China and tough on Russia, and I've been calling for stronger defence, and Liz has fought in Cabinet against the national insurance rises and is now looking at a growth economy. She's spoken out strongly on China and Russia as Foreign Secretary, and she's been clear on her commitment to defence. So for me, those were the three issues that counted, and that's why I'm backing Liz.
Spain has confirmed Europe's second death linked to monkeypox, raising fresh concerns about the virus. In the UK, efforts to vaccinate people are ramping up, with huge queues seen outside Guy's Hospital in central London. Nearly 2,500 cases have now been confirmed here, with most of them in England. Scientists have warned the window is closing to stop the spread of the infection, with global cases doubling every 2 weeks. Cocaine with an estimated street value of £40 million has been seized at a port on the Thames. More than half a tonne of the Class A drug was smuggled into the country from Colombia, hidden in boxes of bananas. The National Crime Agency says a boat which was en route to the Netherlands was intercepted at London Gateway on the Essex coast. Rail services have been severely disrupted by the latest round of industrial actions. Thousands of drivers from 7 train companies walked out as part of a series of strikes over pay and conditions. It's affected football fans travelling to opening games of English leagues, as well as people trying to get to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. In a major shake-up of the youth prison system, the government is building the UK's first secure school for young offenders. It will house some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, aged 12 to 18, including those who've committed murder. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab visited the site in Rochester in Kent. He said the radical change in approach aims to break the cycle of crime.
Is that with this particularly tough-to-reach young group, it is the key to giving them an opportunity to turn their life around and fundamentally reducing the very high levels of reoffending from young offender institutes. And that will keep our streets safer.
On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Emily.
Rioting on the streets, mass civil disobedience, demonstrations, people refusing to pay their bills en masse, parents stealing food from shops to feed their families, old people shivering in their homes, scared to turn their heating on as the bills pile up. This might sound extreme. As British citizens, we are stoic. It's not in our nature, at least for most of us, to cause trouble, scream and shout, stomp our feet, as we've seen on the continent. We can put on a jumper, make savings, give up the luxuries. But at what point do we reach breaking point? It's clear we're heading for Bill-mageddon come this autumn-winter. We've been warned that we may face annual energy bills of £3,850. That's 3 times what we were paying at the start of the year. How will it be come Christmas, knowing that in January you could be facing a bill of £500 for that month alone? 46%, nearly half of all households, are already saying they're finding it very or somewhat difficult to afford their bills, according to the Office for National Statistics. How are you and your loved ones coping? Will you dip into your savings or go into debt to pay to keep the lights on, to keep your boiler running? And for most of us who don't live in central London, a car is a necessity, despite what the Green Lobby may tell you. How will you find the money to keep filling up your car when the cost is over £100 a pop? Nearly half of us are even buying less food as inflation continues to shrink our shopping baskets. Are you? Your broadband, your mobile phone tariff, your Netflix package, all are going up, up, up. And it won't just be the elderly who will be sat in their homes huddled under blankets. It's not just the poor who will become destitute. The middle classes will start getting hit by this too, and that's when things will really kick off. Now, this isn't about fear-mongering. This is about reminding our politicians just how severe the next months could turn out to be. Do you have any faith in Truss or Sunak to solve this impending crisis? Sure, Rishi has been quick to dish out the handouts and U-turn on scrapping VAT on energy bills, but he gives with one hand and takes with the other, doesn't he? The Institute for Fiscal Studies has done the calculations and found that if we take into account tax increases, including the national insurance hike, of course, his £37 billion package looks more like £19 billion, and we'll all be hit with the bill further down the line, of course. Truss has at least signalled her desire to put a temporary moratorium on the Green Levy to cut our bills, and acknowledged the importance of producing more domestically produced gas. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, seems to be living in a fantasy world, that somehow a counterproductive windfall tax will suddenly cure all our woes. In the immediate future, the government will need to spend more on welfare payments, no doubt, or else the consequences will be utterly appalling. But whoever becomes our next Prime Minister needs to understand just how severe the impending cost of living crisis will be. For too long, our politicians have prioritised net zero targets over our energy security. But what's more important to you, an arbitrary target or being able to pay your bills? What do you care more about? Of course, we cannot control Putin's malicious control of gas supplies, but the only sustained way to get energy bills down is to build, build, build. The government up till now has deliberately throttled the North Sea in its pursuit of net zero. It banned fracking for fear of the Green lobby. Even now, Kwasi Kwarteng is sitting on a report that could give the green light to fracking. We've got the resources under our feet. Why aren't we digging them out? Apparently, we can wait until the leadership contest is over, but we can't wait. We need gas now. And yes, sure, wind farms, solar panels will all be a part of the energy mix. But in the peak of summer, it was us, it was Britain that was forced to go to Belgium, paying over the odds to import their energy to avoid a blackout here. And whoever thinks nationalisation is the answer, I've seen that going around, certainly has more faith in our politicians than I do. Some have pointed to France and its state-owned utility as the ideal, but it is no such thing. Indeed, it looks increasingly likely that France may be heading for blackouts as its ageing nuclear reactors struggle to keep up with demand. And while it may be popular to bash the oil and gas companies, guess what? They're the ones who we desperately need to invest in securing our energy supply for the future. We need their investment. Sure, we're in a better position than many EU countries. Less than 5% of our gas comes from Russia, compared with half of Germany's. But Britain is far from immune. We saw how our country mobilised, how our government rallied when it came to the COVID vaccine rollout. We need to see the same sense of purpose, the same call to arms, the same drive, and we need it now. Else our politicians may find out that the latest spate of industrial action is only the very beginning of the social unrest we may face come winter. Of course, all of that is just my opinion, and I want to know what you think. Are you worried about the possibility of social unrest, and have you had to make any changes to your lifestyle? Keep your tweets and emails coming in all through the show. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me as well at gbnews or at Carver Emily. I'll get to some of your comments later in the show, of course. Now, welcome along to my panel tonight, the former Liberal Democrat MP Lempit Opik and the ethnographer, how do I say that?
Everyone struggles that.
How do I say that?
Ethnographer.
Ethnographer and academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie. Thank you so much for joining me. So, are you as worried as I am about what we could be facing? Lisa, what do you think?
Well, I am. I'm really frightened. I don't have £4,000 a year for my electricity.
I mean, who does have £4,000 a year?
No, I don't have that. So, you know, and I think about, you know, people, I'm not on minimum wage, but some, you know, people are on minimum wage. They are not, the sums are not going to add up. There's going to be, doesn't matter what you cut out, there is a real possibility that if people pay those bills, that is all their wages will cover. The rent and the electricity bill. And they will have to rely on handouts and food banks for everything else. That is a disgraceful state of this country.
Was this an inevitability, Lempit?
Yes. As soon as we started with this ludicrous, and it really is ludicrous, obsession with net zero, the rest follows from that. You've said it in your monologue completely eloquently and correctly. We've got £1 trillion worth of gas under our very feet, and we're not using it.
Is that what we've got, £1 trillion worth?
That's the estimate, £1 trillion worth. We'd certainly be OK for 50 years. No problem at all. And that would make gas prices plummet, energy prices plummet. You're right, you used the phrase throttle back on the North Sea. There is still a mass of oil down there. Why don't we bring it up? Because we're scared of CO2. Now, I won't give you my normal monologue of mine about why there is no no climate crisis. But there is no climate crisis. And therefore, what we're doing is we are ransoming the people that you've just described because if you've got 85 grand a year like an MP, you can probably absorb an extra few grand a year.
The MPs don't even pay their electricity bills, do they?
They do for their homes away from here, but you're right. I mean,
but they don't, come on, they pay half. They pay on that salary half of what everyone else pays.
Well, there's an irony, isn't there, Lisa Olympic, that the Houses of Parliament probably is the least energy efficient building in the entire country, bar possibly Buckingham Palace.
It's a windy old
and they're the
place.
ones, of course, pushing the net zero agenda.
It is, but the fundamental point is net zero is. Let's not pretend here. Net zero is destroying these prices. Net zero is costing every household in this country thousands of pounds.
But hang on,
We've got to stop that.
Even if, and I take your point, of course, I agree with you to a large extent, but surely what could have also helped in this situation was if we had had more investment in green technology up to this point. Or do you believe that the only answer is essentially to dig more fossil fuels?
Fossil fuels. And nuclear. We could do nuclear. We could do tidal.
But nuclear takes a long time.
Yeah, it does. It seems to have taken over 30 years to get Hinkley Point in order, and it hasn't even happened yet. The very same people who want us to stop using fossil fuels don't want us to have nuclear, don't want us to have tidal. So the Greens are creating a perfect storm where I promise you, solar and wind won't cut it. You saw in one of the examples you gave, we've been begging for energy from Belgium. They don't produce all of theirs in green power either.
No, certainly not, but yes.
Can I just say, I mean, I don't know in the detail that you know about, the green energy, the green taxes. But what I do know is 40 years ago, because of sheer vindictiveness, nastiness and class hatred, the Conservative government at the time absolutely devastated mining communities where I'm from. They absolutely devastated it. They didn't care what was going to happen to those people. They didn't care what was going to happen to those communities. They absolutely smashed them to bits.
Well, what a turn of events it would be if the Tory government was forced to reopen the mines.
Well, do you know what, though?
It could happen.
We have to really remember that it was the Conservative government, out of sheer hatred for working class people and trade unions, they smashed those communities and they have not recovered today.
But Lisa, what do we do now? What do we do for those elderly people who are sat at home, worried? They don't grumble, they don't complain, they sit there, they're trying to make do amends.
You want to get on the bus?
No, but they're not going to be out there protesting, they're not going to be out there making a noise like the public sector strikers at the moment. What are we going to do for these people who may well be fearful that they're not going to... Because Rishi, he's giving out money. He has given out money as Chancellor.
He's given more money out to the rich. I mean, let's be honest, where the money's gone. Every time he furloughed, he gave them furlough money. Where did that furlough money go? It went to the companies to keep them going.
Well, yeah, because we need companies to continue going, otherwise everyone's unemployed.
We've got to do three things. Number one, we've got to start junking the green levies. And actually, Liz Truss has been interesting on that. I'm not a Tory, so I'm not going to tell the Tories what to do. But she's been clear. She gets this point, that these crazy green levies are pushing things up. Secondly, we've actually got to subsidise the least wealthy. It's a temporary measure because you can't live on handouts forever. Thirdly, we've got to get fracking going. We've got to open that stopcock for oil from the North Sea. Or someone can come into this studio and sit with me and explain to me why CO2 is actually wrecking the climate. And I'll tell you, they haven't got the courage to do it because they know I'm right.
What's the reluctance there? Because the fracking, yes, people talk about fracking. They say it could be a solution for us. It could solve our problems. But the amount of resistance that there would be on the local level.
No, well, not with fracking. There are many communities, and I will know this better than me because a lot of this is in the north. A lot of potential fracking communities want the jobs. There aren't a huge number of jobs, but there's quite a lot of high value that comes in from it. All this idea about earthquakes, it's just nonsense.
Would you have fracking where you live?
Would I? No, I wouldn't. I mean, I've come from a mining community and I know what our communities look like sometimes when they used to fall inside. Houses used to disappear overnight.
You don't get caverns with this.
No, okay. But I personally no. I mean, I spent a bit of time in West Virginia and I saw some of the devastation that fracking had done there. So, no, I wouldn't want fracking. But...
Well, from what I've heard, it's very small tremors. The equivalent of, dropping a hardback book on the floor that we're so worried about. Anyway, we're going to have to go to a break. But after the break, rail strikes have kept millions of workers at home this week. Is striking a legitimate form of protest, or should these protesters be shown the door? We'll debate the issue after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Emily Carver, deputising for Neil Oliver, who is away for the next couple of weeks. So, many people up and down the country have been affected by yet more strike action on the railways today as train drivers at 7 companies strike over pay. This is the second strike of the week which passengers have had to deal with after action on Wednesday affected 14 train companies. With more strikes planned for August and union leaders in other key sectors also threatening industrial action, could Britain be heading for a general strike? I do hope not. And should those heading for the picket lines be met with harsher consequences? Here to discuss this, I'm joined by Kelvin Mackenzie, the former editor of The Sun, and Laurie Laban, the researcher and author. Kelvin, do they deserve the sack if they're striking?
No, I don't think they deserve the sack, but I do think that if you're going to face fire, you should probably deal with it with fire. And the idea that, for instance, the RMT or ASLEF or any of these other kind of agitators are able to simply walk in and walk out of work and cause maximum disruption to people's lives, I think should be dealt with in another way, which is to say to them, you're either coming to work and working normally, or we're going to lock you out until we come to an agreement. Because I don't like the idea, or I don't think it's fair, that we, as the consumer, or as a passenger, I'm a commuter, get treated like a battering ram in order to win somebody money.
Laurie, what do you think? Do you have some sympathy with the view of thousands, tens of thousands of commuters who are sick and tired of having their transportation, their commuter journey, their trips for leisure, their trips to the hospital or whatever, put on hold by, in general, quite well-paid strikers?
It is annoying. I was supposed to go and do something today, which I couldn't because of the strikes. But if we were going to get rid of the ability to strike, which is effectively what we're talking about here, then workers would lose a key mechanism by which they can fight for wages. That means they can pay for their homes, for all the other things that they need to have a basic standard of living, let alone a good life. I think that people aren't hugely annoyed with this. I think that actually we're in a situation in this country where we're far more worried about the cost of living. And many people who work for the railways aren't hugely well paid. Railway workers are all types of people who are maintaining the tracks, people who work in the stations, people who are then serving those staff and so on and so forth. And some of those people are paid barely anything. They weren't paid very much before inflation came along, and it's been eroded even more. So we have to maintain some ability for workers to be able to influence those that pay them, or else what happens?
Laurie, is the problem, though, not, and I do sympathise with workers who, of course, all of us are facing inflation and the pay isn't going as far as it used to, and of course people sympathise with that, but isn't the problem here that the RMT are being so dishonest, Mick Lynch and so on? You know, they want to keep hold of these outdated working practices. They're not willing to reform. At the same time, revenue from passengers is down. You know, it's at 60 to 70% of what it was pre-COVID. There needs to be, you know, reductions. There needs to be cost savings. And sorry, but you can't have no redundancies at all and inflation-busting pay rises at the same time. Surely something's got to give. There's got to be a compromise.
I mean, they've not got an inflation-busting pay rise, have they? I mean, I think that's why they've gone on strike today. And they've been very clear.
They can't have both.
Well, they've been very clear time and time again that one of the reasons why they're on strike is because they are worried that there aren't enough staff who are maintaining the railways. I've got a survey result here from people who work and maintain tracks. These are not well-paid people who are greedily trying to hoover up more money to go and spend on holidays abroad or whatever. These are people who aren't paid a huge amount of money. And it's saying here that nearly 90% of them think that cuts to track maintenance will put passengers at greater risk. I mean, that's a serious problem that they're fighting for here. So there's a lot of complexity behind why people are calling for these strikes. But look, let's zoom out for a second. We're in a situation where Britain is the wealthiest it's ever been. It's wealthier than it was when it had an empire that stretched across the world. And money is not being handed down to those people who primarily earn their living from wages. A lot of it is sucked up to the wealthiest in society. And that at heart is what this is about. It's people railing against the system that has not worked for them for a number of decades now.
Kelvin, I mean, you can perhaps remind us a bit of the 70s, not to be rude, but surely unions are there to protect workers from exploitative employers. They're not there to racketeer pay rises from the public purse.
Well, I think it's a very old-fashioned view to think that the trade union movement is there to protect the workers. We've got
labour market regulation, Kelvin, I guess.
We have rules on employment. We have rules on discrimination. We have laws coming out of our backside to deal with those kinds of issues. This is just straightforward. This is just straightforward bullying. You're a commuter. Either the taxpayer is going to fund RMT's demands, or you see the trouble with the RMT right now is, I mean, these are nationalised industries. So the 25% you talked about, there is no money. Everybody's losing money. Did you know that on a Sunday, the Sunday work is unbelievable, really, in this day and age? The Sunday work for the railways is not something that you have to be rostered on for. It's actually something which you either volunteer for or you don't turn up. These kinds of things have to be got rid of, right? Let's just get rid of them. And I then suggest that the RMT could probably get a decent pay rise. I am not going to drop a tear for ASLEF making, I don't know, 50, 75,000, 100,000 a year, whatever they're making, right? I'm sure they're not worth it. But however, through leverage, they get it. So they're going to have to give something up. Why don't they just come halfway? Why don't they buy a lottery ticket? I'm not in favour of banning strikes, but I am in favour of some kind of fairness in the negotiation.
Strong stuff from Kelvin, but isn't that one of the points what Kelvin made there? You know, something has got to give. You know, we see the fact that there are ticket offices still staffed and manned at stations where, you know, only a handful of tickets are ever sold in that way. We've got machines, we've got automation coming down the line potentially. There are so many ways in which jobs have been protected which aren't productive and, dare I say it, aren't needed anymore, that hark back to the Victorian times, basically. And if you were running a business and you'd seen your revenue go down, your passenger numbers drop, you'd have to make savings. And is that not what has to happen here? This money doesn't come from, you know, a magic money tree. It does come from the public purse. And let's remember, most people don't even use the trains.
You're painting a picture there of British Railways being in, I think you almost said it, a Victorian state of you know, in existence. And that's not the case. There's huge penetration of technologies into railways. We're not in a situation where the tiniest stations have an abundance of staff sitting around doing nothing. I mean, the other day I was on a train that ended up getting cancelled because there weren't enough staff to man the train, and really needed someone to talk to, but there was no one there at the ticket office. We use in the media, we often use these narratives, or they're often used that make it sound like there's a bunch of well-paid people sitting around doing nothing and demanding high wages. That's not what is happening here. You got a situation where the British rail companies, the companies that provide railways in Britain, often they are dependent on the state. So in that way, they might be, they act like they're nationalised, but they're still moving profits out of the country. If you go to some train stations, you'll see the German nationalised public railway logo on some of the trains, because of that. That's the situation we find ourselves in this country, where some companies have been given the right to run some of these trains and they're sucking money out of this country, right? But the bigger thing here, there's a bigger thing here, which is that we've found ourselves in a situation after many decades of certain laws and other things leading to a situation where work is becoming less paid, wages have stagnated more than they have for a very long time. And that's not because the country has suddenly been hit by some
Comparing
cataclysm.
apples with pears, though, because you're comparing public sector wages to those in the private sector. And yes, we have seen stagnation, but in the public sector, people do still have better pensions, better working conditions in many ways, and in many other ways. Kelvin, I'll give you the last word. What do you think the government should be doing to try and kick this in the bud? Kick this in the bud. You know what I mean?
I would shut the railways until there was an agreement. I think the idea of them saying, I tell you what, we'll turn up on Monday. What do you think, John? Do you think we should do Thursday? No, I don't think we're bothered with that, Tom. I think that is the wrong way. And I think I would be very grateful for when Miss Truss comes in, or Mrs. Truss comes in, that she actually does something about it. I think we have a very difficult time ahead of us. I think we need to have the toughness on both sides of the table.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that strong debate. Strong stuff there. Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you, Laurie. Thanks for joining me. So what do you make of that?
I think Kelvin McKenzie's living in an old Ealing movie. That's what I think.
Box office.
I was going to say, how long is it since, blokes stood on the platform and got all right, Gov?
No, but
it doesn't happen.
If they take their their lunch break. Apparently, if these workers take their lunch break, if they get interrupted by their boss at any point during that lunch break, they can start their lunch break again on the clock.
You're kidding me.
Do you know what?
I read anyway.
I'm not listening.
Some tabloid rubbish, but
listen,
I think it might be true.
I'm not listening to know apparently this happened or that. As someone that has grown up in a working class community, and everybody in my family and all of us have had working class jobs, let me tell you now, these jobs do not pay. You don't sit around smoking all day and not doing anything. This is not what
we need to look at how to make them pay, and to make them pay we need to be more productive and have a more productive workforce, surely, Lempe?
Well, yes, we need to be more productive. This country doesn't do terribly well on that basis, but more fundamentally than that, the question you're asking is, should we ban strikes? No, because I agree with Ali, because the working class have relatively...
No, should workers get the sack if they strike?
Sorry,
no, they should not.
Equally harsh.
I think the two things are connected, but should they get the sack? No. But the problem is, you strike yourself out of a job. How can we run a first world economy if you can't get to work? Because the trains are shut down. Now, Mr. McKenzie there, worked with him before, he's actually quite mild today, I thought.
Yeah.
But he's basically saying, shut the whole system down. We were talking about the environment before. How are you supposed to get to work if we've all given our cars up?
Do you not think there's a mismatch, though, between, in the private sector, many small businesses have collapsed over the last 2 years. They're really struggling. The average pay rise in the private sector has been something like 4.3%, and these strikers are asking for, inflation busting, so i.e. 11%. They've already been given. No, but the problem is the money comes from the taxpayers. So it's very difficult to justify without changes in the working practices.
So what we're going to do then? We're going to go back to the first story where we said, right, the reality is £4,000 energy bills, rents are flying up, There is no social housing at all. So people are now privately renting that is going sky high. So are we all happy then that people have no money to feed themselves? Is that where we are? People that work 40 hours a week, we're all happy then if they have got no money to feed themselves. As long as they're paying the landlord, paying the electricity, we'll figure something out.
I wish we could pay everyone, millions a year, but unfortunately it's coming from the public purse, and the railways seem to not have made the progress that we need them to. But we're going to have to go to the break, Lambert. Hold that thought. After the break, Liz Truss plans to make catcalling and wolf whistling a criminal offence if she becomes Prime Minister. It can be a little unpleasant at times, but should it be illegal? We'll be discussing this next, so don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to the programme. I'm in for Neil Oliver this evening. So Liz Truss is the current frontrunner to become the new Conservative Party leader and therefore our next Prime Minister. Part of her pitch to Tory members is a crackdown on crime and particularly violence against women. No one could argue with that, but Truss also wants to introduce a standalone offence of street harassment, which would criminalise persistent catcalling or wolf whistling. But should such behaviour really warrant a criminal record? To discuss whether that is a good idea, I am joined by the author and journalist Ella Whelan. Hello, Ella, how are you?
Hi, very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining me. Now, this was supposed to be a debate, but unfortunately we couldn't get our other guest up, so I'm sorry about that. So what is your view on this? Do you think catcalling is pretty horrible for most women? I don't know if you've experienced it a lot. Well, I think every woman on this planet probably has at one point in their life. Why do you think there's this move to ban these things, to make them criminal offences?
I think this is an incredibly cynical move from Truss, and it's been matched by an equally cynical move from Sunak, who is now suggesting that he'll do his own bit for women by making down blousing illegal. As opposed upskirting and things like that are already part of a criminal offence. I suppose we'll have a law for every part of a woman's body and everything she's wearing, there'd be up sleeving next and all the rest of it. So these are cynical moves that are aimed at signalling to, Tory membership, who I'm not trying to be prejudiced here, but I can't imagine this is top of their priority list. It's trying to signal to the people who they want to win their votes that they're going to do something nice for women. And I think we should be very wary about these kind of calls, because this is not about a principled defense of women's freedom. This is not a kind of stand from either Truss or Sunak in relation to making women's lives materially better. There's nothing any of them have said about childcare. There's nothing any of them have said about abortion rights or anything like that. This is simply a kind of tokenistic play into the kind of I'm a feminist line. And the reason why it's problematic is because if you introduce further legislation into women's private lives by making things like wolf whistling, catcalling, down blousing, whatever, illegal, what you're really saying is that women need police surveillance and state intervention in order to go about their daily lives. And that essentially is giving a very damning view of women as constantly needing knights in shining legal attire. And I'm as someone who cares very passionately about women's freedom, I'm very opposed to that.
Do you think, I mean, you make some brilliant points there, but do you think that we are potentially policing male to female interactions too much? You know, with the Me Too movement and everything that came after that, a sort of suspicion of male and female interactions that seems to now be encroaching into law. I mean, after the Sarah Everard case, the shocking case of the girl who was raped and murdered when she was walking home, there was huge calls for things like, or the government was proposing, I think it was Boris Johnson who was proposing to have, you know, plain-clothed police officers in nightclubs and bars and more surveillance. And is this what women want?
Well, it's in relation to the Sarah Everard case, it's very strange to argue that because we know that the Met are in special measures and that the person who murdered her and abused her was a police officer. So, you know, in that context, no, I don't want more coppers who are WhatsApping each other about wanting to rape each other's colleagues and things like that, looking over my shoulder in a club. But even just, you know, putting that aside, you're right that there is a move to try and police our interactions, particularly the interactions between men and women. We've seen it with regulations in the workplace. We've seen it now with calls for extra legislation to protect women on the street. And you have to be sensible here, right? Because as you said at the start when you were introducing the segment, most women have experienced some kind of bad behavior. You know, unfortunately, some people have experienced criminal behavior. Most of us have had things shouted at us that we didn't want, that aren't pleasant. It's not funny. It's not clever. Sometimes it can be pretty sexist. But we've also all probably been in situations in which we've wanted a stranger to approach us, you know, like whether it's in a bar or whether you're kind of, you know, I've been coming back from clubs when I was younger, late at night, and you kind of catch eyes with someone on the tube. So what I'm trying to say is that the grey areas are a very important part of human relationships, particularly when it comes to sexual relationships, because the grey area can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. And when you have something like the blunt instrument of the law coming in and trying to regulate that grey area, it gives no space for the positive stuff. You rule out the positive stuff, you know, the potential for you to meet your next partner outside the chip shop at 3 o'clock in the morning because one of you's drunk and Larry and comes on to the other one. I mean, that's how some love stories start, right? That's what is the basis of a lot of Hollywood movies, that kind of interaction. And so I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say, what is it that we need to do to stop and prevent women from having to deal with the kind of chore of sexist pigs? And it's not to get the police involved. It's not to make things illegal, but it's actually to genuinely, and this is, I've just written a pamphlet called The Case for Women's Freedom, which is published by the Academy of Ideas, is saying, how do you actually genuinely empower women? Empower, that word empower has become so cheap now. Everybody empowers everyone. It's like raising awareness. It just is a throwaway term. But to genuinely politically talk about what it means to empower women and women's freedom and give them the confidence to call things out that they don't like, to try and form the kind of society that they do like, and admitting that you're a victim or suggesting that you have to have legislation is not empowering.
No, it's not empowering. And also something that I've read, and I don't know what your view is on this, because there may be an element of truth to this. A lot of women have said, who have been quite vocal on wanting it to be a criminal offence, you know, wolf whistling, catcalling. They've said that this is the first step towards essentially becoming a rapist. So if a man wolf whistles, that's a sign that they may then, the next year it may go to touching, then the next, the year, and so on and so forth, until, they're committing heinous crimes. Do you buy that?
No, I don't buy it. But again, you've got to be, the answer has to be nuanced, because, really, the weird thing is that despite the fact that most women will have had some kind of interaction like that, equally, it's true that most men don't act like that. It's just that the ones that do it to a lot of people a lot of the time. So, the vast majority of men don't think it's okay to shout, "Show us your knickers," at a stranger on the street. Thankfully, most men do not think that that's acceptable. But what do you do? But what do you do with the few that do think that's acceptable? These are kind of weird guys who are acting outside the social norm. But if you start saying that they're simply on a sliding scale, then what you're essentially saying is, and I'm going back to that kind of grey area, that there's no nuance in human behaviour, that people are simply born kind of villains. And it's become part of a problem with the way in which, something like Love Island is being talked about at the moment, where you have, young men not exactly displaying their finest behaviour, in the world on national television. And you have women's charities genuinely talking about the fact that I was on a programme with someone the other day who said these are the domestic abusers of the future. And if you use that kind
What a leap. But...
Yeah, if you use that kind of histrionic language, what you're really doing is blurring the lines between the serious kind of behaviour that we do need to tackle and the sort of idiot behaviour that can just get corrected through what used to be the norm, which was that women used, and particularly actually in working class communities, going back to this last discussion you were just having that I was listening to, is giving people a kick up the backside, basically, and that, I think I want to see more of that and less of this kind of cringing reliance on the police to do the job for us, because actually social norms and progress in society is not created by men in uniforms. It's created by ordinary citizens interacting with each other. And I think we've forgotten that.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you. That was really interesting. That was author and journalist Ella Whelan on that, whether we should make wolf whistling a criminal offence. What do you think, Lembit?
About context.
Have you been around wolf whistling?
No.
Not been wolf whistling anyone on your way in?
Never been my thing, I have to say. And not really from
they come to you.
Not from
Have you been wolf whistled at?
Yes. I have.
Did you enjoy it?
I was flattered, actually. It was in
that's because women
Holloway
are
Road.
correct, aren't they?
It was by a man, actually.
Oh, it was by a man.
That was an assumption by you.
Yeah, there we go.
And I remember I was flattered by it at the time. It was in Holloway Road. But I didn't find it intimidating, because the guy he was obviously gay, and he obviously was trying to attract my attention. But that's what I mean by context. The way you behave in a club is completely different to what's acceptable in a workplace. You can smoke at home. It's illegal in a pub. So the context matters here. The second thing here is, and this perhaps worries me more, the totalitarian nature of this. In 1984, the book by George Orwell, Julia has to slip a note saying, "I love you" to Winston, the main male character. Is that where we're heading? And the third one, perhaps most important to me, this actually demonises men when hundreds of thousands of men in this country suffer domestic abuse. Because although predominantly we assume it's mainly male to female, there are many men who really, really suffer. But it's stigmatised because the men are potential rapists.
We don't want to teach boys that they're inevitably going to be these monsters, right?
No.
Which I do think we're teaching boys a little bit at school. They're constantly being told how to behave in a proper way. And while that is important, I do think it should come from, your family, your parents, your relationships. You learn that as you grow up, being told from a young age that you're a threat to women. I'm not sure that's healthy. What do you think?
I think that I think all this sort of, in Nottingham where I live, misogyny is a crime already.
Is it really?
Yes.
Punishable by what? The council?
No, I think it's a hate crime. It's been
so in Nottinghamshire police.
Yes, the Nottingham.
They're very big on hate crimes.
Yes, yeah. So in Nottingham, it's already a hate crime. But does that mean that domestic violence levels have dropped? No, it doesn't.
No.
What this is, I think this is about, it's sort of virtue signalling. It's sort of signalling somewhere that this is, without actually doing anything.
So how many women would? Okay, so
But I mean,
someone wolf whistles and says "oi oi, sexy" or whatever to a woman, and she doesn't want it. How many women would actually say to the police officer, yes, can you handcuff him and take him off to jail?
Well, they wouldn't come. They wouldn't come. Let's be honest, when your house is robbed, they don't come. They give you an insurance number. So they wouldn't come. Let's be honest. If I phoned the police up in Nottingham and said, I've just got on the bus and some blokes, you know, told me to, you know, whatever, and I didn't like it, the police would go,
a lewd comment.
yeah, you know, the police would go, oh, that's really terrible, here's your crime number. Yeah. That's it. It's just logged. It's just logged.
It's just virtue signalling.
It's worse than that, because, and I'm going to emphasise this point again, because there'll be many men watching this now who'll be saying to themselves, yeah, well, I'm actually experiencing domestic abuse, but how can I say anything about it when you actually have posters in the London Underground saying that it's all to do with the female Euro competition, that essentially men are the problem. Men are the problem, and so are some women. The only way we're going to fix this problem, I actually think it's probably the most debilitating thing that in alcoholism in our society, is by beginning to make it possible for the abusers to talk about why they abuse. And you don't do that by this tokenistic rubbish, which does nothing at all to deal with the thing which is destroying families and people and sometimes leading to murder and suicide.
Well, if we get to talk again, we must talk about domestic abuse. It sounds like something you're passionate about.
I care about it a lot.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. But anyway, we must move on. After the break, it's time for this week's Great Britain, and I'm looking forward to welcoming Mitch Hume, who, having fractured his spine 6 months beforehand, has now run 33 marathons, wow, in 16 days to raise money for charity.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. I'm covering for Neil Oliver, Emily Carver. So you've been reacting to some of the topics we have been discussing. Now, Robert says, Labour closed more minds than the Conservatives ever did. That is true. That is factually correct, I think, is it not, Lisa?
Yeah, what Labour didn't do, they didn't send the Metropolitan Police into our communities to batter us. So...
Anyway, Malcolm says, am I thick? How come the energy companies are awash with money, yet still put up the direct debits? Well, I think the issue is that their profit margins are quite small. But yes, I think looking at their massive profits, those billions of profits that Centrica and Shell and all these oil and gas companies are making, I understand why people are thinking, can't a little bit of that be shared to us to help us with our energy bills? John says, just start fracking. That'll be music to your ears, Lembit. Let's start fracking. They've wasted months doing nothing. They want us to suffer because it keeps us in a state of fear all the time. The wealthy and the political elite can't lose. I think there's a lot of people who think that the government just want to keep us in this state of fear. Do you think that's true?
About the environment, definitely. The inevitable consequence of that, the unintended consequence, is the fact that we're impoverishing the poor because of the energy prices. Make no mistake, well, at least I'm claiming, that the whole problem about cost of living is based directly on the fact that we've messed up our energy policy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Well, I think it's entirely true.
I think there's been a shift in how people are now looking at people who have got power, rather than sort of, I don't know, just accepting that they know things. People are now very distrustful.
They are very distrustful.
Yeah.
I mean, people can't be told anything. Everyone can Google, they can research, they can do their own workings out and find out that actually what the government's telling them isn't quite the truth. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a genius. Anyway, Paul says a £4,000 a year energy bill means everyone will be paying £1,000 towards these dumb green taxes. Green taxes will kill Brits this winter. I think it is actually 25% of your power bills, your electricity bills that goes on these energy bills. I don't know how much VAT is on top of that. But it's a huge proportion that does go on these taxes, is it not, Lembit?
Yeah, it is. But on top of that, the base energy prices are higher because we've created this pointless scarcity. I mean, we've got all the gas underneath our feet. We've got all the oil in the sea, underneath the sea. And as you said, we've got coal to last us a lifetime. The only reason they get away with it is because they terrorise us with demon CO2. If I'm right, and there'll be viewers who don't agree, but if I'm right, this is the biggest own goal in Western history.
Also, you would have thought that our elites would have been keeping a closer eye on the geopolitics here. They know that, you know, the gas is coming from regimes that are slightly dodgy, to say the least, and that perhaps we'd need a bit of energy security domestically. You would have thought they'd look ahead.
Yeah, it's not joined up. I agree.
There's no joined up.
There's no joined up, no. And I think politicians, they measure everything by 4 or 5 years, don't they? So they're not thinking 25 years in 30 years.
So we need some forward thinking. Anyway, we must move on. Now, every week on the show, Neil pays tribute to a Great Britain, and I'm delighted to be able to do the same. Mitch, whom was hit by a lorry just before last Christmas and suffered a fractured spine. But just 6 months later, he ran the length of Britain from Land's End in Cornwall to John O'Groats in Scotland, the equivalent of 33 marathons in 16 days. Mitch has been raising money for a new playground at Horton Lodge Community Special School, which is attended by his daughter, Dolly, who suffers from cerebral palsy. Hi, Mitch. Mitch, are you there? Hi.
Yeah, I'm here. You're right.
How are you doing? Now, I must ask, before we move on to your charity work and all the marathons, how on earth did you get hit by a lorry?
I was driving down the road and it was stationary, and a lorry just went straight into the back of me. Yeah.
So what exactly are you doing all this running for? Tell us, explain what charity you're doing this for.
I'm trying to raise £150,000 for a playground for Horton Lodge, a special needed school. It's close to the heart. My daughter goes to Horton Lodge. I know how amazing the school is, but the playground now, it's just in a situation where it's been there for over 30 years now, and it needs renovating. And yeah,
And how much joy do you think this new playground could give to the kids?
I know exactly how much joy. At the moment, they're in a situation where they can't use any of the facilities on the playground. So just before I did the run, I took a trip to Horton Lodge just because I'm a professional cleaner. That's what I do by trade. So I thought to myself, the playground's run down. I might be able to clean it and make it look brand new. That wasn't the case. A lot of the equipment's in a situation where it can't be used. The kids can't use it at all. So I went home and I just had a thought. I thought to myself, I can't carry on with my life knowing that those kids can't go out on a playground at dinner time and not play and not use any of the facilities. So I just knew that something has got to be done. So I just took it into my own hands. I asked Horton Lodge if I could raise the money for the playground. They were overwhelmed and they said yes, no problem. So yeah, I went live on Facebook throughout the journey.
That's
and I did videos every day.
That's such a lovely thing to do, such a kind thing to do. But what is it like running one marathon, let alone 33? I've never run that far in my life. Has it taken a toll on your body, or are you a very fit, naturally fit person? Oh wow, look at you! I've just seen a shot of you on the treadmill.
Yeah, that was actually after the race. So I'm actually continually training now as we speak. Last night. Every night since I've finished the race, I've been still running till 4:30 in the morning. I go to the gym, I train until close, and then as soon as it's closed, I go home, and then I carry on training after that. So, yeah, my body's in good condition. My mind's in a good condition. I was actually planning on running back from John O'Groats to Land's End straight away from touching the pole and running back. But I had that many hurdles throughout the journey. And the final hurdle, the guy who was supporting me, Chris Hopkin, he supported me all the way through my journey. Every single day, he was feeding me at every stop, at night, anytime in the morning. Because like what I'd do is I'd run through the day and then I'd run through the night as well. So I'd be running through towns and cities, and he was there at every point. And his father passed away, unfortunately, on day 33. So that was probably the hardest day and the hardest challenge that I had throughout it. And I had to travel back from John O'Groats. I was 54.8 miles away from finishing, and we received the bad news. So I drove Chris back straight to Stoke. And then I had to get back to John O'Groats to finish the race. I had no sleep, I had no food, I had no fuel. I travelled back down there throughout the night. Each journey, it was 8.5 hours. So, yeah, but I was determined to finish the race and complete what I set out to do.
Wow, you must have such strength of character, a lot of willpower, a lot of strength.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, fueling your body for that long, how much do you eat?
A lot, yeah. Yeah.
You must be carb loading constantly.
Yeah. But it's more mental strength. I found throughout the journey, I spoke to a lot of people, and the first thing that they'd say is, "Oh, I can't even run down the street, or I can't run a bath," and that's where they're going wrong, telling themselves that they can't do something. So I was trying to educate people as well along the journey, telling them that they've got to believe in themselves and that they can do it. Anything's possible. So yeah, I've pretty much built myself up.
Mitch, where can people go to if they want to sponsor you? Where can they find you?
They can find me on my Facebook page, Mitch Hume, MITCH, and then HULME. I went live on Facebook throughout the event, so they can see the journey as well. I tried putting as much as the journey on there, but what I'm looking to do is another leg. I'm going to run from John O'Groats to Land's End in the next 4 to 8 weeks, while my body's still in this position, because my fitness level's really high at the moment, and if I was to leave it 6 months, 8 months, I'd find it hard to maintain this fitness because I really am putting my body through hell day in and day out. So yeah, it's something
Thank you, Mitch, so much for joining us and being our Great Britain of the Week. Thank you so much. It sounds like what you're doing is fantastic, and what you're doing for your daughter is also just very moving, isn't it? Lembit, what do you make of that? Have you ever done anything for charity?
I've done lots of charity, I'll have you know, but not running.
No running? What about you?
I don't like charities. I'll be honest, I'm not, that doesn't mean I don't think that we share in solidarity.
You're not going to run across the country?
I can't run across the country, no.
Oh, dear. OK, well...
What about you?
Well, it's 7 o'clock. This is Neil Oliver Live with me, Emily Carver, on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. Hello, I'm Emily Carver, and I'm standing in for Neil Oliver for 2 weeks while he takes a well-earned break. Coming up in the second hour of the programme, Tom Bower has been hitting the headlines recently because of his new book, Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War Between the Windsors. He will join me shortly to discuss his book. We'll be discussing this week's announcement that the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic for children and young people is to close down. And bad news for ice cream fans. Have we seen the last of Mr. Whippy? The president of the Ice Cream Alliance will be on to tell us more. Plus, do we need a middle-aged Love Island? We're all about diversity and inclusion here, so why not make Love Island middle-aged? And plenty more chat with my guests Limpa Opik and Lisa McKenzie. But first, let's get the latest news headlines.
Emily, thank you. I'm Bethany Elsey here to bring you up to date on GB News. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the death of a child in Lincolnshire. 9-year-old Lilia Valutitier was fatally stabbed in Boston on Tuesday. Lincolnshire police say a 22-year-old man is in custody. He was detained following information from the public. They say they're not looking for anyone else in connection with their investigation. Tory leadership contender Liz Truss says she's fighting for the support of her party members. Speaking at a campaign visit in Bromley, she welcomed Tom Tugendhat's endorsement, but declined to say whether the Select Committee chair would be given a role in her cabinet if she wins.
This is a very, very close race, and I am fighting for every vote. What I will deliver is a growing economy, more opportunity across our country, lower taxes, and unleashing the potential of everybody across the United Kingdom. That's what I stand for, and that's why I want people to support me.
Spain has confirmed Europe's second death linked to monkeypox, raising fresh concerns about the virus. In the UK, efforts to vaccinate people are ramping up, with huge queues seen outside Guy's Hospital in central London. Nearly 2,500 cases have now been confirmed here, with most of them in England. Rail services have been severely disrupted by the latest round of industrial action today. Thousands of drivers from 7 train companies walked out as part of a series of strikes over pay and conditions. It's affected football fans travelling to opening games of English leagues, as well as people trying to get to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. In a major shake-up of the youth prison system, the government is building the UK's first secure school for young offenders. It will house some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, aged 12 to 18, including those who've committed murder. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab visited the site in Rochester in Kent. He said the radical change in approach aims to break the cycle of crime.
Is that with this particularly tough to reach young group, it is the key to giving them an opportunity to turn their life around and fundamentally reducing the very high levels of reoffending from young offender institutes, and that will keep our streets safer.
England's women's football team have been training ahead of the Euro final tomorrow, where they'll be aiming to win their first major championship trophy. The Lionesses will take on Germany. The two teams last played each other in the Euro final in 2009, when Germany won 6-2. This time, though, the match is on English turf, with the final at Wembley Stadium. 90,000 fans are expected to be there. Good luck to them. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Emily.
Good evening, welcome back to Neil Oliver Live with me, Emily Carver. Now, Meghan Markle, everyone's favourite Duchess, is reportedly unhappy about a new tell-all biography concerning the supposed rift within the royal family. The book Revenge was penned by Tom Bower and has been dominating the headlines over the last couple of weeks. According to Heat magazine, the Duchess of Sussex found several of the allegations unearthed by the book gut-wrenching. So, joining me now to discuss all this is Tom Bower himself. Hi, Tom. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Nice to be with you. Thanks.
Now, I've been listening to your book on Audible, and I think I'm about half of the way through. And the thing that strikes me is that you seem to be suggesting, through your words, that Meghan Markle is a bit of a chronic liar. What, in your view, is her biggest whopper that she's made?
Well, the biggest was in the Oprah Winfrey interview, where she claimed, first of all, that Archie was denied a title because he was black, and he was denied protection because he was black, and both those things were untrue. She also said that she hadn't been married at Windsor on that sunny day, but 3 days earlier. She claimed that she had not been allowed to travel anywhere. Her passport was taken away and her keys to her house were taken away when she traveled in that period to New York and to Morocco. So there's a whole string of things which she said in the Oprah Winfrey interview alone, which were untrue. But there are other things about her past, which in my book shows that she hasn't actually been very accurate in her own recollection of what happened.
That she was essentially an only child, which was, of course, one of the things that Thomas Markle, her father, and her half-siblings took a lot of offence at. Was she always a liar? From what you've read, from people you've spoken to, is this something that she's just always had? To me, it seems like she's a bit of a narcissist, to say the least. So perhaps that's just a trait that comes with narcissism.
Well, I mean, the point about Meghan is that she likes controlling everything, and she, from a very young age, and she likes to control her own narrative. In other words, what Meghan thinks is the truth, even if the facts are different. And I go into that in the book of how she nowadays, and for some time, a long time, has always interpreted what she wants to be the facts as the truth when it's not. So her statement that she was a single child, an only child, was clearly untrue because she lived for some of her childhood with Samantha Markle, and she knew that her father had 2 other children. Why she said it is because she didn't like her half siblings, and she wanted to feel that she was single. But that's the thing about Meghan. The whole of her attitude towards the royal family, when her recollections of what happened, they're very, very wrong. And of course, that affected also her relationship with her father. There was a very famous letter she wrote to him, which was published in part by People magazine and then by the Mail on Sunday, where her recollection of what happened in the run-up to her wedding, in the relationship between her and her father, was very different than the facts. But she wrote this fictionalized account to suit her own purposes, in my view.
How do you think their life is panning out over in the States? Are they a happy couple? In my view, it seems to me that they're very codependent, and it's them against the world. And is that how they're living their lives?
Well, I think you're right there. They are very codependent at the moment. I think that Harry is very dependent on Meghan. She is the strong person in the relationship. She's far more intelligent. She's far more experienced. And to that extent, in Harry's view, he was rescued from Kensington Palace by Meghan. Are they happy? Well, I think they have problems because they need to find a role. They need money. Their lifestyle is very expensive. Much depends on Harry's memoir, which will be out later this year, and the Netflix documentary. I think that the only way they can earn money is by dumping on the royal family even more than they have so far in the interviews they've given. And that, of course, will spell more trouble. But I think that in the long term, they do have a problem because they're living on the royal payroll, the royal notoriety, as a limited life.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about Prince Harry's book because I was concerned that potentially Harry was waiting for the Queen to pass in order to publish this book. But then I've read, and as you've just said, that it could be coming out as close as Christmas. Is that a certainty? Because it seems to me that it's rather crass to do so, well, at this time in the Queen's life.
Well, I can only say that they've announced that it's coming out in November, and it was always, in my view, going to come out in the autumn this year. And that's why I brought out my book before his, because I wanted to set the scene. He's got a challenge in my book to have a lot of questions he and Meghan have to answer. Of course, it's not his book. It's been ghostwritten, and I just wonder whether he's even read it, let alone written it. But I'm sure Meghan has read it. I'm sure Meghan has had a lot of influence on its content. And she will have decided where to draw the line in her battle with the royal family, and particularly with Camilla, Prince Charles, and William and Kate. I mean, these are, but in terms of delaying it because of the Queen, I don't think they could delay it anymore. The Queen, by all accounts, is in very good health at the moment. She was even photographed and filmed riding not so long ago. A 96-year-old woman riding a horse. It's extraordinary. So I think that they had to bring it out just for their own financial reasons and because the publishers are clearly anxious to get it out to earn their own money.
And how is Meghan, just to finish, how is Meghan doing on the circuit? She's made it quite clear, I think, that she has ambitions to be a Democrat politician in due course. Is she going down well, or is she starting to leave a bad taste in the mouths of some of people over in the States?
Well, I would clearly, in my own interest, say that my book has had an influence on her reputation, which I'm sure it has. I mean, she's got to take the knocks now.
Yes, how many books have you sold? How many books have you sold?
They've printed over 100,000 in Britain, and in Kindle and audio, over 50,000 have been sold. So it's a #1 bestseller, and a lot of people in America are keen to buy it. They needn't wait too long. There'll be an American edition very soon.
You're brave doing this kind of book.
I have to. It has done well, but it's a good read. Look at the Amazon reviews. I mean, I never had anything like it. Normally, I get lots of 1 stars, but this time, they're very praiseworthy. Let me just quickly tell you this. I think our audience will be interested. What's interesting about Meghan and her campaign is how very cleverly targeted it is. I mean, she does appeal all the time to minority interests, which reflect on her and her ambitions, whether it's pregnant mothers, or whether it's the diverse communities, or whether it's some sort of charity or other, not with much money, but with her presence. And of course, always introducing herself as the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. She trades on that. So, and she's very careful. I mean, it is very carefully calculated and calibrated. So this book which is coming up, the Netflix, is all part of the promotion of Meghan Markle as a future politician, possibly, or a possible further icon. But she's got a major problem now, because I think that my book shows that she's not pure honey, that she isn't actually the saint which you'd like us all to believe. And she now has a challenge on her hands.
Well, thank you very much for coming and joining us this evening. I am very much enjoying the book so far, so I'll continue to listen to it when I'm on my commute home. So thank you very much, Tom. That was Tom Bauer, who, of course, has written the book Revenge. She's a cunning woman, is she not, Lisa?
I'm going to be really honest. I actually do not care. I'm as interested.
You don't care? I love the drama.
I'm absolutely as uninterested in this as I am the Kardashians. I've never seen the Kardashians, and I'm not interested in this.
I'm clearly just sad.
I'm going to be honest.
I enjoy the drama.
I think we should sell the whole of the royal family to America. Let them have them.
No.
Off with their heads.
I am a royalist, always have been. Maybe because I've got Estonian roots, and that's a republic. I think that the royal family is, on the whole, great. But my late friend and late agent, Terry Mills, sadly died of COVID. When the marriage took place, he was really down in the dumps. I said, why are you so sad? He said, insider knowledge, she's going to cause so much trouble for the royal family. Now, I think Harry is...
Oh, he said that before it was allowed.
Before any of it was allowed. It's whenever the country was celebrating the Harry-Meghan love affair. And he's not here to see it, sadly, now. But what he predicted has been borne out. Why? Because I would say that Meghan isn't really working in the best interests of the royal family, but she's certainly working in the best interests of herself. Can you hold that against her? Not necessarily, but I think Harry's been taken for a ride. Hence the rift with what looks like the rift with his brother and potentially with his father. Hopefully he'll come to his senses.
Yeah, I'm hoping these things aren't irreparable. You must care a little for the drama, the soap opera.
Did you know what? I watch Coronation Street. I get all my soap operas.
Oh, so you do like a soap
opera?
opera?
Yeah, I get all my soap operas from the north. I'm not interested in Meghan or Harry or the other two or the kids or none.
You care about
the Queen.
Do you watch the wedding at least?
The Queen. Do I watch?
Do you watch the weddings at least?
No, I don't.
Not even the weddings. Wow.
Do you know why? I just think as a country we would be better off without them.
If you were invited to Buckingham Palace for tea,
no,
the Queen,
you'd
go.
I would not.
I'd certainly go. Anyway,
I'll come with you.
Coming up after the break, this week it was announced that the NHS is to close the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic for children and young people. We will be discussing the consequences.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So, the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic, Tavistock, will close next spring after an independent review led by Dr. Hilary Crass found that the clinic was not, in quotes, a safe or viable solution for children suffering with gender dysphoria. Whistleblowers have revealed how young people were being placed on puberty blockers after only a handful of appointments. In at least one case, a child was put on these life-changing drugs after a single consultation. More than 5,000 children were referred to the clinic last year, compared with 138 in 2010 to 11. Following the review, the NHS has committed to urgent research on the impact of the drugs, and both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have pledged to review the use of puberty blockers if they win the leadership election. In the meantime, care will be handed over to children's hospitals, which the NHS says will offer a more holistic approach with strong links to mental health services. Joining me in the studio, I am delighted to welcome writer and director Charlie Bentley-Astor to transitioning herself. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. Explained the process so well and in such a emotional way. You described how you went through all these different emotions on your way to feeling like you were potentially born in the wrong body. Can you explain how that came about?
Yeah, so unlike a lot of young girls that we're seeing at the moment who present with rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is sort of 13, 14 puberty age, I felt a kind of dislocation with my sense of self from a very young age, sort of 3 years old, as soon as I can sort of remember consciousness. But I never really thought anything of it until I started hitting puberty. You know, I continued to feel out of place, but, you know, I thought, you know, what else can I do? So come puberty, things got a lot worse. I saw sort of everyone else really sort of feeling anxious about puberty, but really sort of being excited about it, you know, and I never was. It's chronically terrifying. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'm just a bit of a late developer, you know, because my parents told me that I was a bit late to speak, a bit late to walk. So I thought maybe I'm just late again. But as I saw all my friends getting into relationships and, you know, sort of kissing and hand-holding turned into sex, and I was still there like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point. Yeah. So then I found out about gay relationships and the whole gay world, and I thought, oh, that makes a bit of sense. And so I thought, fab, let's have a look into that. I know. So I had a look in. I used social media and all that kind of stuff. But my background is theatre. Been doing theatre since I was about 8 years old, and so that's a notoriously sort of queer scene. And so I had lots of friends who were saying that they were gay or bi, and so I kind of came to the conclusion after sort of a few years on Tumblr and those kind of websites that are notorious for people going down the gender rabbit hole, essentially. And so I thought, okay, I'm probably bi. So I went and told all my theatre friends, you know, and they were disappointed. Yeah, that was the reaction I had.
Did they want you to pick a lane?
Yeah, it's kind of that whole biphobia thing, bi-erasure, you know, pick a side. Yeah, and so they were disappointed. And I was like, okay. So they convinced me, as if it's as easy as that, just to be gay. And so I was like, okay, I'm gay, everyone. And so for a few years, I kind of lived that gay life, pride flags everywhere. And of course, with the gay life, it's all sort of connected. Everyone loves communism and everyone hates the Tories. And so I really got into that identity. But as puberty developed, and I still couldn't, the gay thing wasn't working for me. And so I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because I became increasingly depressed. And
because you were trying to fit a mould that simply wasn't you.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to live up to, there's a set of expectations that come with there's a difference between, and you guys will know this, LGBT plus versus the queer, otherwise known as the alphabet.
Ideology almost, political ideology that you have to sign up to more than just your sexuality, do you not?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so it's a sort of, it's a very, obviously not the gay LGBT conservative side of it, but the ideology side of it is quite promiscuous. No one's expecting to commit to relationships with anybody. It's just free love.
Why? Because that's just seen as passé. That's seen as
it's part of the
old-fashioned. It's part of the patriarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when did this sort of exploration of, what you could be, putting a label on yourself, and the pressure that you felt from your friends in the drama world and whatever, I think I know the sort of type of scene. When did you start to be, were you pushed down the trans gender dysphoria route, or did you find that yourself online? Who were these friends?
Yeah, and so my friends were just, my classmates, but then I sort of moved into the much bigger theatre scene in London. And so there was a lot of young people taking part in theatre programmes. And so, and I'm not from London, I'm from sort of the counties. And so it's very different up here. And so I didn't feel comfortable with the gay thing. And I was feeling increasingly depressed because I did feel at odds with my body still. Yeah. Obviously, I didn't know what gender dysphoria was. But all my friends were doing things like shaving all their hair off and wearing really sort of baggy clothes to hide
becoming androgynous, hiding their sexuality.
Yeah, exactly, okay. Whilst being quite sexually active.
Right, okay.
And so there's a weird dichotomy there. But I liked that kind of androgyny because I was never particularly feminine. I loved playing in the woods. I was in the Boy Scouts rather than Girl Guides. That kind of thing. And so when I saw all this androgyny stuff and I wasn't comfortable with the whole sexual atmosphere of the culture, and so I was like, great, if I dress really boyish and put on all these clothes that sort of hide my, blossoming figure, then I won't get the kind of sexual attention that's making me uncomfortable and exaggerating that sense of dislocation that I already had.
It sounds to me that essentially you weren't ready to become a woman.
No.
You felt unready, and there's so much pressure, and this drama group sort of gave you a way out of that. Yeah. By sort of hiding it, even though they happened to be sexually promiscuous.
Yeah,
From the outside, they were looking very androgynous.
Yes.
Okay.
And so after all of that was happening, people started talking about trans. And when I was sort of 13, 14, wasn't a thing. No one in the group was trans. But by the time I was 15, 16, a significant proportion was, all of them girls, becoming boys. And so when I was I'd already been pushed from that bisexuality into that gay identity. And so every layer was a stripping back of my femininity, and I was more than welcoming it because I didn't want that to go into womanhood, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And so every stage was a little stripping back of my femininity, and
you actually ended up going to the NHS.
Yeah, and so the chronic depression had meant that I went to see therapists from about 15 years old. Described this dislocation that I had. One therapist mentioned gender dysphoria, and I was like, oh, okay.
So the therapist actually mentioned it to you?
Yes.
Okay.
But a lot of my friends who identified as trans didn't mention gender dysphoria. It was more something that's emerged in literally the past couple of years. At the time, it was just, I'm trans now, but not a reason behind it, other than just, I feel that I'm something else. And so I was like, maybe I feel like something else too.
And you said something that was very interesting. You said that the NHS or the therapist that you spoke to affirmed what you were telling them rather than challenged you.
Yeah, and so I'd say to them, oh, do you know, I think I might be gay or I think I might be bi. And they'd be like, yeah, perhaps you are. Rather than it being a question, rather than saying, why do you think that, as a therapist should, sort of inquiring why are you, what's behind your thoughts, why are you having that kind of sense of identity, what's underpinning that. But instead of saying that, it'd be, yeah, you could be. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm a man. And it's like, yeah, you could be. It's like...
Well, that sounds like an absolute negligence on my part, but just before we bring in Helen Joyce, because we're going to, of course, speak to Helen, who wrote a very brilliant Sunday Times bestseller on this issue. You wrote, and I found this very interesting, that it was only when you were challenged on how you felt that you ended up not feeling suicidal.
Yeah.
So you were challenged, and this is something that children always have to be challenged, right? And it maddens me so much that you were never challenged on this.
I know.
And you got to such a stage of you were almost, you know, went down the route of getting puberty blockers and so on. So who challenged you?
People won't like this, but Jordan Peterson.
Really? So you went down that YouTube rabbit hole after the trans stuff?
I did. I had a hate watch. It just appeared in my up next on YouTube, and all my friends had sort of mentioned Jordan Peterson and
as a hate figure.
Yeah, exactly. You know, all the things that are said about him, and he'd come up. I was like, okay, let's see what this guy has to say. I wanted to affirm all the ideas I had about him, but I got to the end of his first lecture, and I was like, I don't disagree with anything he's just said.
And that's what challenged you to think again about how you were feeling.
Yeah. So he sort of. He talks a lot about the horrors of communism, which I was never told about by my friends. You know, it's Marxism, it's going to save the world, it's the new utopia. And so as I delved, I sort of learned critical thinking through watching his videos. And I saw that he'd talked about trans ideology a little bit with Bill C-16 in Canada. And just that process of deconstructing absolutely everything that I thought I knew and had been told, I eventually turned that introspectively.
So there we go. Perhaps, sorry, we're going to have to bring in Helen, but perhaps Jordan Peterson, the figurehead of the white male patriarchy, saved your life, potentially. So we're also joined now by Helen Joyce. Helen, are you there? Helen is, of course, the author of Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality. So you've just listened to what Charlie had to say. It's pretty moving stuff. And, you know, I look back at my time when I went through puberty, or was starting to. I wanted to cover everything up. I didn't want to be a woman yet. And luckily for myself, I wasn't going through any sort of other mental health problems, so it never became a massive problem. But I can just see, having gone to a girls' school myself, a high-achieving girls' school, that it would be could be almost the new eating disorder in that way. What do you think of that, Helen?
Not could be, it is. It really is. This is the latest social contagion among teenage girls. It's many things besides. It's a crazy ideology. It's the end point, perhaps, of a certain version of liberalism. But one of the things that it is a social contagion among teenage girls. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Oh, there were so many things that Charlie said that rang so true. I mean, I'd go farther than saying that she needed to be challenged. I don't think it's just that people were affirming her. I think it's that they were selling it to her. I think she was being sold labels to try on, things that would never have popped into her mind. I mean, what girl is going to think, oh, maybe I'm really a boy? It's such a completely absurd thing to think that people won't think it unless it's put into their mind. And also interesting about Jordan Peterson, I too am a heretic. I've already recorded an interview with Jordan Peterson that's out in about 3 weeks' time. So, yeah, I think he's doing great work for some young people who listen to him.
Yes, I agree. Actually, I'm guilty of searching his videos a few years ago. I remember I got into a massive rabbit hole listening to all sorts, looking at all his philosophy and all the psychology, all of those lectures. It's brilliant. Do you think that's true, Charlie? That it was suggestion selling?
Completely. My friends, but also the therapist I had, definitely played upon the fact that I was so confused and had no answers and would have got to the point where, like you said, I'd become suicidal. Nothing was helping. And so it was just a chronic sort of searching for anything. And so every time, transitioning it was presented to me as the thing that will solve all my problems.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Dare I ask, now I don't mean to be insensitive, but did you have family? Where were your parents in all this? Were they not challenging you? Because I wanted to ask Helen, what should parents watching this, and what would you tell parents watching this and young children watching this, how to deal with this? Because I think a lot of parents are having their daughters come home and saying that they feel this way. So were your parents absent in all this?
So I kind of hid it from my parents.
You hid it, okay.
I don't have the best relationship with my parents. They tried to be supportive when they could, but it wasn't the kind of thing I felt I could go to them with. And so the theatre community was where I was that kind of alternate identity. And so my parents couldn't do anything, but my advice for parents would be just have a look at what your kids are looking at on their phones, because that's a big thing. Who are they talking to? Just gently, every time they say something that takes you off guard, and be like, oh, where did that phrase come from? Where did they hear that? Just interrogate gently and see if you can't find a common link between things.
Helen, is that advice that you would give? What are your conversations?
Great advice, but parents are very much on the back foot at the moment, because where a lot of this is happening is in schools. And when parents try to tell schools not to teach children that, gender trumps sex and that sex is not binary and that being a boy or a girl is a matter of what you say you are, the parents are told that they are the bigots. And I know lots of parents by now, they tell me their stories and they're absolutely heartrending of, fighting with the schools threatening to call in social services, their children being groomed, frankly, into believing that you decide which sex you are yourself. So I'm hoping that the government is going to crack down on this sort of nonsense in schools. But until then, parents are really in a very difficult position, because if you push back on it, you're the baddie. Now, the Tavistock closing is a very, very good thing, because that clinic was basically a rogue clinic. It was operating in ways that no other healthcare service does, no looking for evidence, entirely ideologically driven. And so, yes, there's going to be continued gender treatment within the NHS, but what we hope is that it'll be much more driven by evidence, and there's going to be a research programme, and it'll be linked with other mental health services, because at the moment, gender has just been ring-fenced. As soon as a kid, like Charlie, says gender, people don't want to know about other things. They aren't going to help you with your depression or your autistic spectrum disorder. It's just gender, and they don't have any real agenda of scientific evidence and long-term research and so on. So, yeah, things are moving in the right direction, but parents are really on the back foot at the moment.
Yeah, this is shocking stuff. Do you think that... I've completely lost my train of thought there. What do you think the answer is? I was going to ask. So many of these girls, it seems, and I think Charlie is also a case, seem to also have autism. And why is that? And maybe Charlie can also answer this before we have to move on, sadly. But why is it this link between autism and this gender dysphoria?
Well, autism, especially for a child who isn't diagnosed, can lead to odd sensory perceptions. People don't feel necessarily very comfortable in their bodies. Right. And also girls in particular who are on the autistic spectrum are not very feminine a lot of the time, because they don't learn the social rules that girls learn about being a pleaser and being nice and playing along and getting along in the group and so on. And at the moment, like Charlie said, everything that happened to her was people saying to her, this is the solution, this fixes everything. It's the panacea. When somebody says gender dysphoria and they say, if you transition, everything will be fixed. So somebody comes in with, an incredibly wide range of symptoms. And then if somebody says gender dysphoria and somebody says transition, complex problems turn into a simple problem. There is no cure for being on the autistic spectrum. It's going to cause you difficulties that you're going to have to learn to manage. There's no real cure, easy cure for depression. Eating disorders have very high death rates, I'm sorry to say. But gender dysphoria, you transition and everything will be fine. So of course people land on that diagnosis. It's like promising a child that you can just flick a switch and your life will be perfect.
Gosh, it's so cruel when you put it like that. Charlie, just to finish, I'll give you the last word. What does this Tavistock Centre closing down, what does that mean to you? What do you hope that this will mean?
Obviously, they're setting up, I think, 6 new centres. I just hope it means that the screening process before people get to puberty blockers and surgery is much more intensive, in depth, really sort of interrogating, gently, obviously. These are young, vulnerable kids. But, for me, I started feeling at odds with my gender when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and it took me till 21 to finally feel comfortable in my womanhood and femininity. And so these conversations need to be had, because even after long bouts of therapy, it still might be that transition isn't for a particular person, and that also needs to be a valid treatment.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Helen, are you still there?
Yes,
Helen, thank you very much. And I've got a copy of your fantastic book and also a copy of Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage. I think that's a very good one for people to read as well, about that social contagion element, that this idea is spreading around girls' schools in particular. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a lovely evening for the rest of the evening. So now I just need to read out a comment from the Tavistock Trust. The Trust said, in response, that they support the need to establish a more sustainable model for the care of this group of patients, given the marked growth in referrals. The expertise that resides within the current GIDS-DS service will be critical to the successful formation of these early adopter services and providing continuity in patient care. We will work closely with partners and commissioners to ensure a smooth transition to the new model of delivery. Over the last couple of years, our staff in GIDS or GIDS have worked tirelessly and under intense scrutiny in a difficult climate. We are proud of them and thankful for their unrelenting patient focus and extraordinary efforts. I think some might disagree with that. Anyway, plenty more to come, including potentially worrying news for fans of Mr. Whippy. And is it time there was a Love Island for the middle-aged? All that coming up after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
On Mark Dolan tonight in The Big Question, should we be able to take pets to the office? We'll have a working dog live in the studio. My Mark Meets guest is royal expert and I'm a celebrity star, Lady Colin Campbell. We Feel Your Pain returns as I reach out to a celebrity going through a tough time. Tonight, Rebecca Vardy, who's down to her last Lamborghini. And in my big opinion, Joe Biden denying the US recession makes him the biggest liar in the White House since Nixon. Plus Andrew Neil's latest comments on GB News. Hear my response at 9. See you then.
Welcome back. Now, it is meltdown time in the ice cream world. Would you believe it? Curbs put on diesel vans could make the classic 99 Mr. Whippy a bit harder to get your hands on this summer. Organisers of festivals and fairgrounds are increasingly asking vendors to switch off engines to limit fumes and wasted fuel. Lemper Opik is fuming in the corner, if you can see him. Councils are also making similar demands over lucrative pitches in parks and at seafronts, with electric-powered ice cream vans costing as much as £180,000. Isn't that more than a Lamborghini? Some traditional vendors fear they will have to ditch Mr. Whippy and only stock pre-packaged or soft scoop ice creams. The scandal. To hear more about this, I am pleased to welcome Katie Alston, the president of the Ice Cream Alliance and an ice cream lady herself. Hello, how are you?
Hello, good evening to you all.
I enjoyed reading that out. Now, this is a bit of a scandal, actually. Is Mr. Whippy seriously under threat?
I myself am a Mrs. Whippy. Is it under threat? I think climate change, we believe, is everyone's responsibility. Not just as every single industry. And within the ice cream industry, we're certainly not shying away from that. I just think it's about keeping the situation in perspective. At the moment, there are approximately 5,000 ice cream vans on the road. That represents 0.015% of vehicles on our roads. The UK vehicles contribute 27% of our carbon output. So we emit 1% of the world's carbon. So actually what we're really talking about is 0.015% of 20% of 1%. So let's get this in perspective. And let's talk about what we do. You know, what we do. We deal in happiness. That's what we do. We're the British summertime. We are moving towards electric vehicles. We're just not, the vehicles are ready. Our market leader have created the vehicles. They are expensive and out of a lot of vendors' reach at the moment, particularly after the last few years we've had. So it's about riding the storm until we can be fully electric. But as is the same with lots of industries, we're just not quite ready yet.
You are a fantastic spokesperson for the ice cream van industry, I must say, having all of those sums to hand. Essentially, ice cream vans are not the massive issue in terms of rising temperatures around the globe, it seems. You know, I would take it more seriously if the government said, you know, we're banning private jets or something like that. Until they do that, I don't think they should go over ice cream vans. So where is your ice cream van situated usually?
Well, I'm based in Bognor Regis on the south coast. We have a regular traditional round. Each day I will see at least 3 individuals who will only see me that day. They won't see anyone else. So that's one of the things we do. We are actually a real part of our communities. We've watched children grow up. We become part of people's families. They then bring their children out. We help with major fundraising. We today have been at our local cottage hospital, really promoting the event and raising valuable funds. There's so many things that I think are so valuable with what our traditional ice cream van does. And we just need to keep that in mind. And is that something we want to lose for that little bit of contribution at the moment when we're trying really hard? Many of my colleagues were very early adopters of compostable packaging. We were asking for it, insisting on it. The first water that I saw in a can was from an ice cream van, because they said we are just not going to have any plastic on our vans. This was long before I'd seen them in a supermarket or anywhere else. So I think it's just, dare I say it, but keeping it as a balance.
I think so. I think we need a little bit of perspective might be nice in this kind of situation. But I think you might have mentioned at the start, but I always have someone in my ear, so I don't always catch absolutely everything that you said. But how many ice cream vans do we have in this country at the moment, do you know? And has it been a bumper summer for ice cream vans, considering all the hot weather? Because I'm sure they had to claw back a lot of money after the pandemic.
Absolutely. At the moment, we think there's approximately 5,000 ice cream vans. So the number is reducing as the costs to run a van. And it's not just a van, it's a business. It's someone's livelihood they're running as well. So it's keeping that in mind, are the amount that we have on our roads at the moment.
Thank you so much, Katie, for taking the time to speak to us this evening. That was Katie Alston, the president of the Ice Cream Alliance, and of course an ice cream lady herself. Lembit, is this an example of the net zero agenda crushing the little man?
Yes, honestly.
Or lady?
Honestly, it's so ironic. We're meant to be keeping cool, and then they ban the ice cream vans. I want Katie to be in my transport reality group. I'm going to call her afterwards if she doesn't mind.
She was brilliant, wasn't she?
She was really good.
1 millionth of the CO2 emissions. Come on, give me a
She was great.
Lisa, what
she
do you
was the Mick Lynch of ice cream, wasn't she?
I was thinking exactly the same. She was the Mick Lynch of ice cream, but obviously much better looking. Anyway, moving on. Is 45 the new 25 in the world of reality TV? The well-toned 20-somethings of Love Island are about to get some serious competition from Silver Foxes, Lembit Opic, Dad Bods and Cougars. ITV are planning a spin-off to the top-rated Love Island reality show, continuing the format of putting single people on an island to look for love, but this time featuring contestants aged between 40 and 60. But will the nation tune in to find out if age is really just a number, or will the sight of the older generation smooching in the sunshine prove a turn-off? So joining me now are the TV critic Sarah Jane Robertson and former Love Island contestant Sharon Gafka. Well, I was thinking about this idea and I thought, why not? Sharon, what do you think? You've been on Love Island. Would you go on it again in, say, 20 years' time?
Hopefully there's not a need for me to go on it again in 20 years' time, but we can't foresee that element of my life. But I think it's a good thing, and I really welcome the fact that they are looking to diversify cast, especially of Love Island. I feel like we are seeing the same types of people walking through the villa doors. But I've lived on my own my entire adult life, and I was like, I hate sharing a bedroom with 11 other people. So at the age of 40, are you going to want to share a bedroom with 11 other people?
That is a very good point. I hadn't even thought about that. I could not imagine my mum, although she's obviously married to my father, but, any of her friends who are single, being caught dead, having to share a room with 11 other strangers who may be, getting off in the bed next to you. You don't want that. Sarah, what do you think? Do you think there's a market for this as a TV critic?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is, Love Island has just done so well. This is the most popular that the show has ever been. We've come out of the pandemic. There's viewing figures of up to 5 million. So ITV, know it's doing really well for them, and they just want to be able to cash in, on this appetite. Because the thing is, a lot of the viewers that are watching Love Island, people think, oh, it's all really young viewers. A lot of them are in their 40s and 50s, mums of teenagers who are watching it, they sit down with their daughters, they tune in as well. And I think now people are living longer, people are looking after themselves, they're taking care of their appearance. I still go clubbing with my friends. And I think, a lot of early 40-somethings don't think of themselves as middle-aged. They still think of themselves as being youngish, young adults, they've got an appetite and they want to go out and have fun. So there's going to be so many people signing up for this. Absolutely.
Yeah, Sharon, I've seen some like snooty, nasty comments about how it would be hideous to have, middle-aged people around snogging and so on. I don't feel that way. I mean, why not? They're people just like everyone else. They don't have to be 20 and wearing a thong bikini, do they, to take advantage of the Love Island?
No, I completely agree with you. And generally, the snooty, nasty comments come from people who tend to have no profile photo. And there's a reason why they don't have a profile photo. Actually, I've dated a man in his 40s. So, if I find them attractive, why wouldn't other people? So, love is for everyone, and there's no age limit. And I think it could be just as entertaining, if not more entertaining, than the traditional Love Island.
And Sarah, I'm sure you've been obviously watching this season. It's coming to a close on Monday, is it? Now,
That's right, yeah.
Now, a few weeks ago, I was hosting a show here on GBNews, and I said it's going to be Ekin-Su for the win. And I think I'm going to be right. Ekin-Su, for those who don't watch Love Island, because I'm sure lots of our viewers do not watch Love Island, is a feisty Turkish woman who knows what she wants, gets on the wrong side of some people, but I think she's fab. Do you think she's going to win, Sarah?
Yeah, I think she's got a very good chance. She's played a really good game. And that's, as Sharon can say herself, this is what Love Island's all about, having that popular vote and holding the viewers' attention. And that's what she's done, since she's come in. She was a real cat among the pigeons when she landed in there. And I think she's going to go all the way. But yeah, I mean, if this show does take off, for the middle-aged market, it'll just be really interesting to see, how young people do react to it. Because I was talking about it to my hairdresser this morning before coming to the festival. And she's only 21, and I thought she was going to be like, oh my God, no, no way. And she said, I want my mum to go on. She was like, I'm going to put my mum forward for it. So actually, young people, they would be really intrigued, but I think there would be a lot of, how can I put it, taking the Michael. So there would be lots of memes, I think, would come out with some of the middle-aged contestants, if they do get down and dirty. But I just think it would be really, really fun viewing.
Sharon, just lastly, would you allow your mum or your aunt or whoever to go on Love Island? Middle-aged version.
I wouldn't, for the simple fact that they're married.
Okay, well, yes, we don't want to split up any couples.
I would, as long as the production do not turn the volume up on the kissing like they do with traditional Love Island, I would be more than happy for them to participate if they wanted to.
I mean, I'd be happy for that to be a rule all year round for all Love Island shows. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. That was Sarah Jane Robertson, TV critic, and former Love Island contestant Sharon Gafka. Thanks so much. Now, Lembit. Now, I've been doing my research and I found out that you are a serial reality TV star.
Oh, well, that's a relief that you said that. Yes, maybe I am.
What was you expecting?
I don't know.
A serial nutcase.
Oh, well, that would be just about acceptable too, yeah.
No, I'm a celebrity.
Yeah, I'm a celebrity.
Bake Off?
Bake Off, yes. Celebrity.
That was just a guess.
Come dine with me.
Come dine with me.
Celebrity bargain hunt. Yeah, I've done them all.
Wow.
I haven't done Big Brother. That's one I've missed out on.
That's cancelled now, isn't it?
I think this is what Love Island's sort of replacing, isn't it?
Lisa, would you go on Love Island if you were looking for love?
No, I'm in the age range. I'm 54, single. I'm not. No, I don't.
Absolutely not.
No,
absolutely.
I won't even do online dating. I don't like that.
I think they'd have to put them up in nicer rooms. Definitely not sharing one room altogether, because that's just.
The thing you've missed is that would turn this younger version into Lust Island. This would be really Love Island, because it'd be about the heart rather than what's down below.
Now, how far did you get on I'm a Celebrity?
I was third out, which is pretty good for a former politician. 16 days.
That is quite good. Although, wasn't there another politician on who did better?
Well, I'm not going to tell you who it was.
Politician's daughter, perhaps.
No, there was a politician who did better, but I'm not here to promote him. I'm not giving him my space. He can go off and do his own promoting. But you know what? The jungle's a bit like Love Island, because it's a bit of rumpy-pumpy between people there, and it's not age-specific.
Is there?
Yes. It's always covered on television.
I can't imagine.
I don't watch it.
Katie Price, Peter Andre, famous and young,
Oh, yeah.
but it's happened with others too there.
I find it wild that people would, do that kind of thing under the covers on live television.
I can't believe any of them really think they're not being filmed. They go in there with a plan. Not everyone, they go in there with a plan.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to get both of your opinions on what we heard earlier, the serious conversation we had with Charlie and Helen Joyce, of course, about the Tavistock Centre closing down. Now, Lisa, is this something you've thought about?
I mean, yes, because what was once sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago, sort of small conversations amongst small groups of people is now into the wider population, and people are talking about this, about, you know, what does this mean? What is this about? Can a woman have a penis? And, you know, people, the general public are now talking about this.
I think it's because of the sporting events.
Yes, yeah. But also, you know, there's some MPs, you know, Stella Creasy, for example, did a big, you know, women can have a penis and threw the cat amongst the pigeons. So people are talking about it, and I think there needs to be a proper conversation with the healthcare professionals, with schools, with people who are involved with young people about, you know, what is this? What is happening, and how do we support people?
Lembit, are we letting down all of these children?
Yeah, massively. First of all, the Tavistock, I was working with someone...
Just to remind viewers, we're talking about the Tavistock Centre, which is, of course, where children have been given puberty blockers at a very young age.
Somebody I worked with, Amy Gallagher, she was a victim in a different way of the Tavistock. I haven't got time to go into it, but I heard it from her, and it was dreadful, ideological, for reasons myself, Lisa, don't understand. What was their motivation? But the question that you ask is really the right one. What should we do? After we were off air, Charlie, I asked her, how do you identify your gender now? She says, I'm done with labels. The right kind of counselling says, whatever is right for you is right. And we're here to lead you through questions to identify that. And it seems to me that the Tavistock and others are saying, this is what you should feel. And that leads to problems for a lifetime.
It's crazy. And I do think just that idea about girls' schools and these environments where these ideas can just spread and it becomes the thing. You know, it could be sometimes it's eating disorders or self-harm and all sorts, and it just becomes a fad, a craze that people really feel, you know, that they're suffering from.
Do you think this has changed? Has this become a fad?
I mean,
Five seconds.
Right, OK, what I would never say is that someone is wrong completely about how they feel.
Yeah.
But having labels that you are this is not right when it comes to healthcare. That's what I would say.
No, it's not right at all. And the way that some of these therapists have been conducting themselves is, well, it's pretty egregious. But anyway, on a brighter note, that's it from me for this week. But I will be back next week too on Neil Oliver Live. He will still be on holiday. Thanks very much to my panel, Lembit Opik and Lisa McKenzie, and all my other guests tonight as well. Have a great evening. Ministry of Offence is next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.